Hello everyone, welcome back to my video. I am going to discuss in this video the provisions relating to Customs Act 1962. In this video I am just going to discuss on the basics of Customs Act and introduction to the Customs Act. Then we will discuss about some important definitions under the Customs law. Then we will proceed on to discuss on some of the other provisions including charging section under the Customs Act 1962. We will first discuss on the constitutional validity of the Customs Act. Entry number 83 of Union List of 7th Schedule of Constitution of India empowers the Parliament to pass an act for the purpose of charging customs duty on goods that are exported or imported into or from India. So this is what the Constitution says. So the Constitution provides power to the government, central government or Parliament to pass an act for the purpose of collecting or charging customs duty. Okay, this customs law or customs duty is not a new concept. It was there even before. We can normally say that the customs duty practice was introduced by Britishers when they were in India. But this introduction of this customs duty concept or this terminology is not new for even persons in India. Because when we were in our king's rule, when we were in our ancient days, when we were ruled by kings, during that time, if a trader enters into a kingdom with some of his goods, what he will do is he will give some free gifts to the king, and he will ask for the permission to trade his goods within the kingdom. For that, he will provide some gifts to the king. So it was called as a customary practice. It was customary practice which was carried on during those days. Those customary practice has become had been formulated by British government when they were in India, and then they provided a formal act for in the name of Customs Act. During that time, there were so many acts under customs law, and it had changed its name on so many years. And at the end, now the latest Customs Duty Act was enacted in 1962. Okay, so that Customs Duty Act is followed on by our country even today. The basic purpose of this Customs Duty Act is to protect the indigenous industry. Indigenous industry is like we produce or manufacture goods within the country, and this Customs Duty Act empowers or it enables the local manufacture to be consumed locally. So it is the general understanding of any economy that it should be self-reliant. That's why even in our recent scenario, our Honorable PM Modi has given this word called Atmanirbhar, which means what? Self-reliant. So the country has to be self-reliant. It has to be capable of producing its own goods, and the goods that are produced locally should be consumed locally. So this what will happen is it can to the maximum extent we should try to reduce our goods that are being imported, as well the goods that are being exported as well. I can tell you, if we are importing certain goods, it is a expense for the economy, it is an expense for the country. If we export goods, it is an income for the country. But what we say is we will try to manufacture the goods locally, and we will consume the goods locally, and if at all we are exporting certain goods, it should be an excess after the local consumption. If any country follows this approach, then those economy would be a stronger economy, and those countries are called as countries with good fortune. So That is what the this scenario is what the major aim of this customs law. Also, we are seeing that Section 156 of Customs Duty Act empowers central government to formulate certain rules under the Customs Act. So, under that section, central government can come up with certain rules, and the government has notified so many rules for so many concepts as well. And Section 157, empowers CBEC. CBEC is Central Board of Excise and Customs, which was called before, and it has been renamed to CBIC, Central Board of Indirect Tax and Customs, because of the abolition of excise duty in India and emergence of GST. Excise, the concept of excise has gone out, and we call it as indirect tax now. So now the authority is called as CBIC, Central Board of Indirect Tax and Customs, and it is empowered under Section 157 of Customs Act to prescribe or notify certain rules and regulations as well from their side. And in addition to that, even Commissioner has a limited power to issue public notices under the law. Even Commissioner can issue certain notices which is following the basic law of the customs. And we will regarding the applicability of the act applies to the whole of India, including Jammu and Kashmir. So the act applies to the entire part of India, and even with effect from 29th March 2018, this act applies even to certain offences which are committed outside India as well, which has an implication in India. If certain offences are committed outside India, but it has an implication in India, even those offences are covered under customs law with effect from 29th of March 2018. Yeah? And the major purpose of this law, as we discussed just now, it can be classified into these four aspects, which is one is regulating the imports and exports. Whatever the goods that are entering into the country and the goods that are going out of the country, it has to be monitored and regulated. It should not be given free hand to the people to bring in any goods which they would like to, or they cannot take out any goods from India as per their own wish. To monitor this or to regulate these practices, the customs law helps for that. Next is protection of a domestic industry. Just now we discussed that it is very important for a country to be self-reliant, and even I just missed to mention that our Prime Minister or present Prime Minister Mr. Narendra Modi even asked the people to follow Make in India campaign. He has introduced a campaign called Make in India campaign, in which he wants the people to produce their own goods. He wants the country to manufacture the products which is required within the country, and it has to be consumed locally. And in order to bring down our imports, if we bring down our imports, we can reduce the expense of the country, we can reduce the expense of our economy, and resultant to that, our foreign exchange position also will become better. So all these aspects, important aspects of economy, lies with this imports and exports. That is the reason customs duty is a very important law. And it also prevents smuggling of goods. You cannot bring in goods which are in offense of law, or which are against the practices of our economy. And conservation and augmentation of foreign exchange. Just now I told you that we can have a better control over our foreign exchange holdings. So for that purpose, this law helps us. Let us now discuss certain important definitions under Customs Act, so that you should be very thorough or known about the terms which we are using under our customs law provisions. The first section 2 of Customs Act 1962 gives you some important definitions, and in that we are going to see only certain important clauses under that definitions. The first one is clause number 1, which defines about the adjudicating authority. Adjudicating authority is any authority other than Commissioner Appeals or tribunal. It is an additional authority which can pass an order or which can pass an order, or it can decide upon a case under the customs law. It is called as an adjudicating authority, and it has a bearing on the government as well as the people. The second clause is clause number 2, which defines assessment. Assessment is nothing but determination of duty, cess, interest, fee, penalty, etc. under customs law, and also as per Customs Tariff Act 1975. Customs Tariff Act 1975 provides you with the rates of duties, rates of customs duty as well as rates of fees, penalties, etc. under the customs law. So if at all you are exporting any goods or importing any goods, you will have to refer to Customs Tariff Act for determination of the applicable rate for the particular goods. Next definition is clause number 5, which defines bill of export. Bill of export is nothing but a document, an entry into the customs records. It is an entry into the customs records for the goods that are exported. So the goods can be exported in so many ways. The major 3 ways I can refer here is, one is through land route. The goods can be taken out from India through land mode. For example, the goods can taken out from India to Pakistan as well through land. We have a land route from India to Pakistan, so through that route the goods can be taken out, or the goods can be taken out through vessel. Vessel is nothing but a ship through sea route, or the goods can be taken out through air route, through airplanes. There are 3 modes of transporting or exporting goods from India. Among the 3 routes, bill of export is applicable for land route, and in case the goods are exported through ship or sea route or through air route, then it is called as shipping bill. Okay, shipping bill or bill of export are interchangeable, but the terms are used as applicable to the modes of transport. So next clause is clause number 7, which defines on coastal goods. Coastal goods are nothing but transport of goods from one port within India to another port within India. For example, if the goods are transported from our Tuticorin harbor or Tuticorin port to another port, for example to a Cochin port. If the goods are transported from Tuticorin port to Cochin port, that is called as coastal goods. The goods have not left India, it has been transported within India from one port to another. Next is clause number 13, which defines on customs station. Central government is empowered to demarcate certain places as customs station. The customs station will be available at harbor, at the seaport. It can be available at the border lines. It can also be available at airports. Every airport can have a customs, every airport which has an international carrier facility will have a customs station as well. And also section 29 subsection 1 allows CBIC to permit landing of certain vessels or aircrafts in any other port other than customs station. Even the land, though the aircraft or vessels can land in any places or any port which are not being declared as customs station, but for some but with the approval of CBIC. CBIC can permit that. It is power provided under section 29 subsection 1 to CBIC. Next definition is clause number 21, which defines on foreign going vessel or aircraft. What is called as foreign going vessel or aircraft? It is a vessel which goes out from any port in India to any port outside India. It is as simple as that. If any carrier, any vessel or aircraft which the origin place is from, the arrival, the place is from any port within India, and the destination is any port outside India, which is simple as that, which includes a foreign naval vessel, a fishing vessel engaged in fishing or oil drilling outside territorial waters. We will understand what is called as territorial waters. If any fishing ship or any fishing boat which goes outside the territorial waters, it can be called as a foreign going vessel, or vessel going outside India for any purpose, not for the purpose of export, even for any other purpose. If a vessel starts from a port in India, and if it reaches the destination port is outside India, it is called as foreign going vessel. Okay, next definition is clause number 22, which defines goods. This definition is an inclusive definition. This definition includes goods, which includes vessel, aircrafts and vehicles. Okay, it also includes stores, it also includes baggages, it also includes currency and negotiable instruments, and any other kind of movable property. It has given a residual provision, which is very dangerous and very important as well. It has given a generalistic provision stating that any other kind of movable property, any movable property can be called as goods under customs law. Okay, goods include vessels, aircrafts, or any conveyance vehicles. Second one is any stores. Stores are nothing but spares which can be used inside the vessel. Third one is any baggages. Fourth one is any currency and negotiable instruments. Even our currency is called as goods under customs law. It is as per the definition, and with the residual clause stating that any movable goods can be defined as goods under customs definition. So since this goods definition is very wide and large, we are going to discuss one very important case law under this goods definition. This case law was pronounced by Supreme Court in the case of Associated Cement Companies Limited, and this case law the decision was provided in the year 2001. What does this case law say? The facts of the case is nothing but the assessee company has imported certain drawings and designs, which was the drawings and designs was done or performed on a chart or a paper. Okay, this drawings and designs is it is an important goods. That is what intended to import, but the drawings and designs cannot be imported separately. It can be imported through any medium of goods. So it has been drawn on a chart. So the department has contended that the chart, which includes drawings, is a movable goods as per the definition of goods here. That is the reason customs duty will be leviable on that. But the importer has contended that these things do not fall in the definition of goods. Okay, the drawings and designs is what the major the purpose of importation here. They are not intended to import the charts. If they want to import charts, the plain charts, it is considered as goods. There is no doubt here. But their intention is not to import charts. Their intention is to import designs, which can be said as intangible. So that in this case, the apex court, the Supreme Court has provided the following decision. The Supreme Court has observed that if any information technology software, for example, if any software is imported, how a software can be imported? A software can be imported in those days through a CD, through compact disc. The importer is not paying for the disk. The importer is not intending to import the disk, but the importer is intending to import the software, but the software cannot be imported without the help of disk. Disk is a movable goods here. Okay, so it says that the IT assets, though it is intangible in nature, the information technology is though intangible in nature, it has put into a media device which is movable in nature. That is the reason the IT goods which are imported through CDs can be called as goods. Similarly, drawings or designs which are intangible in nature, which cannot be moved from one person to another unless it has been put into a chart or a diagram or any other paper. So that is the reason the nature of the drawings or goods will be called as movable. Accordingly, since the drawings are decided as a movable goods, it falls under the definition of goods. Accordingly, customs duty shall be charged. This is was a decision of Honorable Supreme Court in this case of Associated Cement Companies Limited. Okay, let us continue with the next definition. Next clause we are going to discuss is arrival manifest or departure manifest. What is called as departure manifest or arrival manifest? This particular document has been called as import manifest or export manifest in those days, and from 2018 this terminology has been defined as arrival manifest or departure manifest. Okay, this is a document which has to be submitted by person in charge. Person in charge is nothing but who's in charge of the vessel or vehicle. That person has to submit this document upon arrival of vessel or vehicle inside India. Okay, when he has arrived into India from outside India, he has to submit a document. That document is called as arrival manifest. If the document is submitted upon arrival, it is called as arrival manifest. If the document is for export, then it is called as departure manifest. Import manifest or export manifest is another name for these two documents. And one additional document is called as import report. See, this manifest is applicable on goods that are imported or exported through vessel or aircraft. If the goods are imported or exported through land route, which is through some vehicles, then the document is called as import report or export report. See, generally import report has to be submitted within 12 hours. As per the law, it has to be submitted within 12 hours from the time of arrival. Okay, when the vehicle has arrived inside the border of India, within 12 hours from the time of arrival, the person in charge has to submit import report to the proper officer. In case the goods have been imported through vessel or aircraft, prior to arrival of the goods, prior to the goods landing into the port of India, the import manifest has to be submitted. It says that prior to arrival, okay, even before the goods have arrived, the import manifest has to be submitted, and it can be submitted electronically. Okay, that is what it says. And circular number 14/2017 says that the responsibility of amendment lies with shipping line agent only. In case if the import manifest has been submitted prior to arrival, and after arrival, if there is any amendment to the manifest, if there is any change in goods, okay, if there is an amendment to the manifest, then such amendment can be done by only shipping agent. Agent is a person who is a shipping agent is a separate person. That person can only do the amendment of this manifest. Next is clause number 25, which defines on imported goods. Imported goods means nothing but goods that are brought into India except that are cleared for home consumption. I will tell you, the goods start from a origin port. It can start from somewhere outside India, some country outside India, from an origination port, and it can travel through any mode of transportation I just told you, and it has reached to India. Once it has reached to India, what will happen? Immediately it will be it is subject to inspection by the customs authority. The customs authority will inspect those goods. Once the goods have been inspected, then the proper person who is the importer has to claim those goods. He has to submit the applicable documents, including bill of entry. So all those shipping bill, all those things he has to submit. Once the documents have been submitted, then the customs authority will clear the goods for home consumption. It means what the goods can be taken out from the customs area, and it can be taken to the free place of India, free area of India. It is cleared for the home consumption. Okay, imported goods are nothing but goods that have entered into our port, but which are pending clearance for home consumption. Those goods are called as imported goods. Once the goods are cleared for home consumption, then it cannot be called as imported goods, at least for the definition under customs law. Okay, section 11 subsection 2 clause N says that import or export of patents, copyrights or trademarks may be prohibited by the customs authorities. Any import or export of patents or copyrights can be prohibited. and there was an amendment under this clause which states that even it includes designs and geographical indications also. These are all some documents or which can be prohibited by the customs authorities. Okay, next clause is clause number 27, which defines India. We say that the goods are brought into India. Now we should understand what is called as India. India includes the vast land, the big mass land which forms part of the country India, which is demarcated as India, that is called as India, and it also includes the territorial waters. We just say that it also includes territorial waters. What is called as territorial waters? From the border line, from the baseline, we call it as baseline under the act, from the baseline up to 12 nautical miles inside the sea is called as territorial waters. Okay, from the border line you have to measure up to 12 nautical miles inside the sea water. That is called as territorial waters, which is also called as India only for the purpose of Customs Act. The 12 nautical miles is nothing but 22.224 kilometers, because 1 nautical mile is as equivalent to 1.852 kilometers. 1.852 kilometers is called as 1 nautical mile. So if you calculate for 12 nautical miles, which is nothing but 22.224 kilometers inside the sea, is called as territorial waters. Territorial waters is also called as India. Any goods which have entered into the territorial waters, it means that the goods have entered into India. Okay, that is clause 27. Next clause is clause number 31, which defines a person in charge. Person in charge means what it differs between the type of conveyance. We will just now will understand for each type of conveyance who is the person in charge. In the case of a vessel, in the case the type of conveyance is a vessel, the person in charge is the master of vessel or the captain of vessel. The captain of vessel is the person in charge. In case of aircraft, if the conveyance is in the nature of aircraft, then the commander or pilot in charge is called as person in charge under the customs law. In case of a railway or train, then the conductor or guard or any other person who is having a chief direction. If a person controls the train, or if a guard or any conductor, if any of these three person can be called as person in charge as applicable. In the case of any other type of conveyance other than these three type of conveyance, the driver or any other person. If it says any other person, then it is the decision of the customs authorities to determine a particular person as a person in charge. So if it is any other conveyance or any other person, if it is any other conveyance, predominantly it is the driver who is called as person in charge, or the customs authorities can even hold any other person other than driver if the situations demand for that. Okay, that is what defined as under clause 31 as person in charge. Next is clause number 38, which defines stores. Stores are nothing but goods that are used inside aircraft or vessel. It includes spares as well. If any nuts, screws or any items which are used as part of vessel or aircraft, that is called as stores. Stores also includes fuel or any other spare parts. Okay, stores are used inside the vessel for the purpose of vessel. It is not for the purpose of transporting. It does not form part of goods. It is for the usage of vessel. It also includes the fuel. If the vessel is carrying fuel for the purpose of refilling inside the vessel, it also called as stores, as well as any other spare parts which is whether used or not, immediately used or not, it can be called as stores. That is what defined in clause 38. Okay, now we will look into the definition of high seas. We just now saw what is India. Second, territorial waters also includes India. We just now discussed as 12 nautical miles from the baseline, which is called as territorial waters. Beyond 12 nautical miles, which can be called as exclusive economic zone, which we will discuss now. Okay, see, I will tell you that one, we should find a baseline. From baseline up to 12 nautical miles inside the sea is called as territorial waters, which is also called as India. Beyond 12 nautical miles up to 200 nautical miles is called as exclusive economic zone, which means what? It is not India, but it is under the control of India. You cannot say it is India, but it is under the exclusive economic zone. It is for the economic purpose. It is the zone belonging to India, which is from 12 nautical miles up to 200 nautical miles. Beyond 200 nautical miles is called as high seas. It means what? It is international waters. There is no country has a ownership towards that water. Any ship or any vessel which has crossed 200 nautical miles from the baseline from India, it means that the ship has entered into international waters, or it can be called as high seas. Okay, so we will understand now. I will again summarize that the entire land mass, entire land area belonging to India is called as India. Okay, and any waters inside the sea up to 12 nautical miles from the baseline is called as territorial waters. Territorial waters is also can be called as India for the purpose of this Customs Act. Beyond territorial waters up to 200 nautical miles. 200 nautical miles should be calculated from baseline. It should not be calculated from 12 nautical miles. So the 200 nautical miles starting from baseline is called as exclusive economic zone, because the area of water is under the control of India. It cannot be called as India, but it is under the control of India. Beyond 200 nautical miles, it is called as high seas. It is called as international waters. No country has a ownership towards that area. Clear? Okay, so since we just now discussed on the definition of stores, there is a case law under this definition. Case law is on V.M. Salagaonkar. Okay, this case law was pronounced by Honorable Supreme Court in the year 1998. The facts of the case is, there was a big ship. A big ship is entering into the port of India. What happens is, the port of India does not allow a big ship to enter into India, because what happens, the big ship will have a base. The base of the big ship will be very deep. Okay, if it cannot travel beyond a certain point, because it can hit the ground level inside the water. Under the water, the ship can hit the ground level. That is the reason very big ship cannot enter up to the land area of the port. So what happens, it will be anchored. It will be anchored somewhere in the sea nearby the land area, up to when the ship can travel. Beyond that, the ship cannot travel, because the size of the port or the land area, the depth of the land will not allow the ship to enter into that area. That means the ship will be anchored there. From that place till the land area, smaller ships can be deployed. It can deploy some smaller ships to unload the goods from the bigger ship, and it can be transported to the this land area of the port. For this, smaller ships can be deployed. The question here is whether the spares, stores, etc. used inside the big ship, whether it can be called as import, because the big ship is inside the territorial waters only. Okay, the stores and spares has been loaded from the outside port, but it has been used inside the ship, and it is within the territorial waters. Whether it can be called as import, that is first question. Second question is, any spares or stores used in the smaller ships. We are deploying some smaller ships, right? If any spares or stores used in that, whether it can be called as imports. Third question is, if any spares or stores supplied from India for the usage in that ship, whether that can be called as exports, and any duty drawback, any export incentive can be claimed on that. That is what the question here. The Apex Court has decided like this. It says that Section 87 of Customs Act specifically exempts stores or spares that are consumed by foreign going vessel from duty. For what we just now understood what is called as foreign going vessel. Okay, if any stores or spares used by a foreign going vessel, then it is called as, it is exempted under the Customs Act. So this big ship is called as a foreign going vessel. So section 87 exempts it, though it is taxable. Because of the exemption under section 87, it is the stores or spares used is exempted. And it also says that the smaller ships, no, which is deployed for transporting, that smaller ships are called as transshippers. Transshippers are also treated as foreign going vessel only. So even stores and spares used in that small ships, that can be, that is also exempted under the section 87, under section 87. And further it states, the Supreme Court states that stores supplied to ships are considered as exports and are eligible for drawback. So to both the questions are answered here. Any stores or spares which is brought by the vessel and used inside the vessel, it can be called as imports, but section 87 has exempted the duty on those imports. Second, any stores or spares used by the smaller ships, small ships, that can be called as imports, but section 87 also exempts those stores and spares as well. If the goods are supplied from India to those ships, it can be called as exports, because the goods, the stores are supplied to a foreign going vessel, so it can be called as exports. So once it is determined as exports, then duty drawback or export incentive is eligible for that. We'll discuss another case law, next case law, but this case law is on supply of goods from DTA area to SEZ area. If the goods are supplied from domestic tariff area to a special economic zone, whether it can be called as exports, whether customs law will be applicable on those transfers, because we already understood that SEZ is a zone inside the land, but it can be called as a separate area and can be called as a foreign land. That is what the deeming fiction says. So if any goods have been cleared from DTA to SEZ, whether it can be called as exports, we understood that it is a deemed export, whether Customs Duty Act will be applicable. That is what the question here. In the case of Tirupati Udyog Limited, and the decision was provided by Andhra Pradesh High Court in the year 2011. The facts of the case is, goods that are cleared from DTA area to SEZ area, whether chargeable under SEZ Act or Customs Act. The decision by Andhra Pradesh High Court is, charging section under Customs Act only applies to goods that are imported or exported outside territorial waters of India. It clearly states that it has to be, the goods has to be taken out from territorial waters, it has to enter into territorial waters. But in the case of DTA to SEZ is also within the territorial waters of India, within the definition of India. That means that Customs Act will not be applicable on those clearance. Whether SEZ Act will be applicable, SEZ Act will also not be applicable, and customs duty will not be charged on those clearance which are cleared from DTA unit to SEZ unit. Clear? That is what decided in this case law. Okay, next case law is, the decision is by Supreme Court in the case of Aban Lloyd Chillies Offshore Limited in the year 2008. The facts of the case is, imported goods for consumption in oil rigs in exclusive economic zone, whether taxable. That is what the question here. What does the assessee say is that assessee has imported certain goods. These goods are imported for the purpose of using in the oil rigs. Assessee is a person who is into the business of extraction of oil. You can see, even from the internet, you can see pictures which will have a bigger container which will be deployed or situated in the exclusive economic zone. It means that outside the territorial waters. In that exclusive economic zone, the person can extract oil. That oil can be brought into India. Okay, I told you that even the exclusive economic zone is under the control of India, and oil rigs deployed there. Here, this particular taxpayer or the assessee has imported goods which will be used inside the exclusive economic zone. It has not entered into the territorial waters, whether it is chargeable to customs duty. The decision says that exclusive economic zone is part of territory of India, though it is not within the definition of India, but it forms part of the territory of India, and goods that are imported for the purpose of usage inside the oil rigs which are situated in exclusive economic zone, it can be deemed as imports and customs duty will be applicable on that. Clear? So that is what decided in this case law. Next case law is also decided by Honorable Supreme Court in the year 2010 for the assessee M. Ambalal and Company. The question here is whether the smuggled goods can be treated at par with imported goods. See, smuggled goods are also nothing but goods that are brought into India from outside India. Imported goods also states that goods should be brought into India from outside India. Both are same goods, but one case is that imported goods are declared as imported in India, but smuggled goods are not declared. Whether the smuggled goods can be treated at par with imported goods. Here the Supreme Court has said that there is a separate definition for smuggled goods. Under clause 39 of section 2. Section 2 has defined smuggled goods, okay, which says that smuggled goods are liable for confiscation under section 111 or under section 113 of Customs Act. So smuggled goods are separate goods which are liable for confiscation. That is the reason smuggled goods cannot be treated at par with imported goods. Imported goods is defined separately, smuggled goods are defined separately. Both are seen differently by the Act itself by providing different definitions. That is the reason both cannot be treated as same. Okay, hence smuggled goods cannot be treated at par. That is what decided in the case of M. Ambalal and Company. Okay, so with this we have completed the definition part of the customs law. Let us now discuss on the important section under Customs Act. Important section is section 12, which is called as a charging section. Section 12 only empowers the law to charge customs duty on the goods that are imported or exported. What does this section 12 says? Section 12 says that customs duty shall be levied on goods that are exported or imported from India or to India, exported from India or imported to India. On that, customs duty shall be chargeable at the rates that are specified under Customs Tariff Act 1975. I told you that if you determine that the customs duty is chargeable on a certain goods, then the rate of customs duty has to be referred from Customs Tariff Act. Okay, so that is what even provided under section 12. It also says that the duty is leviable on goods that are belonging to government as well as it is applicable for a person other than government. It is provided under subsection 2 of this section 12. Okay, what is the charging section says? I will summarize again. Charging section says that any goods that are imported or exported to or from India, on that goods customs duty shall be levied. For that you should refer, the rate has to be referred from Customs Tariff Act 1975. Okay, these three are the major legs of this section 12. And there is a subsection 2 which also states that customs duty has to be levied on goods, even on goods that are belonging to government. You cannot say that these goods are belonging to government, even customs duty is belonging to government. Okay, it means what? One government enterprise is paying the amount to another government enterprise. It means what? It is just the transfer from one account to another account which belongs to the government only. You cannot say that in this case under the customs law, even if it is in the case of one account, one government to another government, even the goods belonging to government, customs duty is leviable on that. Okay, that is what section 12 says. Okay, now we will have to understand the taxable event. So once we determine the taxable event, then only we can able to apply the applicable taxes and the liability of payment of duty will arise. The taxable event for imports. What is the taxable event for imports? that has been, though the taxable event is not specifically defined under the Act, the Supreme Court has decided, or it has pronounced the particular event as taxable event in the case of Garden Silk Mills Limited and Kiran Spinning Mills Limited. In these two cases, Supreme Court has provided what is the taxable event in the case of imports. The taxable event can be listed in these four categories. One is if the goods are unloaded at the customs station. The goods are entered into the port, customs port, and the goods have unloaded. Whether that is called as taxable event? No, it is not called as taxable event. Second, if the date that the goods are entered into the territorial waters, the ship is sailing from another country and it is sailing towards India, the date it has entered into the territorial waters, whether that can be called as a taxable event? No, it is also not called as a taxable event. Third is whether the date of presentation of bill of entry, whether that can be called as taxable event? No, that is also not called as taxable event. What is called as taxable event? The date on which goods cross the customs barrier. It means what? The goods have entered and unloaded from the ship, and the goods are brought into the customs area, that is called as customs barrier. Barrier is nothing but the gate, customs gate. The goods have brought into the customs gate. That is the date, that is the event, that is called as taxable event under the customs law. Okay, now we are going to discuss section 15. Section 15 states the determination of rate of duty and valuation. Okay, if there are different duties, rate of duty applicable at different points of time, then what is the relevant rate we should take, and the valuation also. The one event has to be taken or one date has to be taken. On that date, we will have to refer to the rate applicable as well as the valuation applicable. For this, section 15 states that rate of duty and valuation on imported goods is as follows. On imported goods, these are all the dates you should take. One is that goods entered for home consumption under section 46. If the goods are cleared for home consumption, then what is the date? Date is the date of presentation of bill of entry. In general, you should consider as if the date you have presented the bill of entry, that is the date on which the rate applicable and the valuation has to be done for the goods. Okay, I told you that the bill of entry or the import manifest is also called as bill of entry. In the case of import manifest, if the goods are sailing through vessel or aircraft, I told you that the import manifest has to be submitted before the arrival of goods. Okay, in that case, what happens? You cannot treat the date of submission of the bill of entry. You should take the date of arrival of goods as it is deemed as the date of submission of bill of entry. See, in general case, the date of submission of bill of entry has to be taken as the relevant date here. But in case the bill of entry is submitted even before the goods have arrived, then the date of arrival of goods is deemed to be the date of submission of bill of entry, and the rate applicable on that date should be the relevant rate here, and the valuation also to be done accordingly. That is first part. Second part is if the imported goods are warehoused. In the case if the goods are warehoused, taken to customs warehouse, then the bill of entry will not be submitted before. So when from there second clearance will happen. From warehouse, additionally the customs department will clear the goods from the warehouse. In that case, sub bill of entry will be submitted. Another bill of entry or the shipping bill will be submitted by the authorities when the goods are cleared from warehouse. In that case, that is the date of that is the relevant date here for determination of rate of duty. The third is in case of any other goods, date of payment of duty is the relevant date. For example, if you are going to pay the duty today, and what is the applicable rate today for the goods, that rate you should take. Okay, so here it says that, so to simplify this, rate of duty is the rate on a date which is rate of duty is on a later date of submission of bill of entry or date of crossing of customs barrier. It means what? The goods is determined or deemed to enter into India the moment it has crossed the customs barrier. That is one date. Second date is the date of submission of bill of entry. In these two cases, whichever is the later date, on that date you should take it as relevant date for determination of rate of duty. Okay, and we will also understand about the exchange rate. Exchange rate prescribed by CBIC has to be considered here. You cannot take the exchange rate as per your wish. CBIC will notify the exchange rates. Almost every day exchange rates will be notified by CBIC on the relevant date. Okay, you should consider the exchange rate. Here you should not take the relevant date as the date for this determination of rate of duty. For this exchange rate, the relevant date is a different date. What is that? It is the submission of bill of entry. For this exchange rate purpose, the date of submission of bill of entry is to be the relevant date. But in the case of determination of rate of duty, the date you should consider is later among the submission of bill of entry or date of entry, date of arrival of goods, whichever is later has to be considered. Okay, clear? So we will now understand the next provision. Next provision is section 16. Section 16 states the determination of rate of duty and valuation in the case of export of goods. Section 15 states about determination of rate of duty in case of imports. Determination of in case of exports is discussed in section 16. Section 16 states that goods entered for export under section 50. It means what? The date on which the officer clears and permits the clearance of goods and loading into the ship. The date when the officer clears the goods for export is the relevant date for determination of rate of duty. Okay. In case of any other goods, date of payment of duty. See, any other goods can be, it is like an exceptional scenario. You cannot have a regular scenario because many times the goods enter into the customs area only for the purpose of export. Okay, if it is not for the purpose of export, it is for any other purpose, then the date of duty has to be taken as the relevant date for the purpose of rate of duty. Date of payment of duty, I just told you. Okay, there is a proviso under this section. It says that this provision shall not apply to baggage or goods that are exported through post. It means what? This section does not apply to baggage or goods that are exported through post, because baggage, in the case of baggage, you cannot, it will not be cleared by the customs authorities. So the rate of duty will not be determined based on this provision. And the exchange rate also, as similar to the section 15, exchange rate also should be the date of presentation of bill of export. See, in the case of import, it is bill of entry. In the case of export, it is bill of export. The date of submission of bill of export to be taken as the relevant date for determination of rate of duty. Next section is section 14. Section 14 speaks about valuation of goods. Valuation of goods that are exported or imported. Value is simply the value of export or import is nothing but the transaction value. In general, you should take transaction value of goods. Transaction value is nothing but the actual price paid or payable for the goods is called as transaction value. But there is certain condition here. The condition is that the buyer and seller should be unrelated. Okay, the buyer and seller should be unrelated. And second condition is price is the sole consideration for this purchase or sales. For this import and export, buyer and seller, importer or exporter should be unrelated. Second is price should be the sole consideration. We would have seen these two conditions even in under the GST law as well. For the purpose of determination of value under GST law, section 15 under GST law says that value is nothing but the transaction value, which is price actually paid or payable for the goods, provided buyer and seller is unrelated and price is the sole consideration. The same, it is as similar to the same provisions of GST Act. Under Customs Act, under section 14, it says the same definition, but it also adds one clause to it. It says that the The value is for delivery at the time and place of importation or exportation. It says that, see for example, you will know that in case of export or import of goods, the goods start from the origin port on one date, and it may take even days and months to reach to the destination port. In those cases, the value of the goods may differ. They may have an agreement that the value of goods will be determined at the date when the importation or exportation takes place. Okay, that is the date we will the day value of the goods will be determined. It can be an agreement between the importer and exporter. So under Customs Act, the price actually paid, which is at the delivery or at the time and place of importation or exportation. Time and place of importation means what? When the goods have reached to the reached India, port of India, that is time and place of import. Then time and place of export is place that is inside India, because from the goods, whether the moment the goods have been loaded into the vessel, it means that the goods have been exported. So when you determine the time and place of import and export under the Act, on that time and date, what is the value of goods, what is the price that is payable for the goods, that is called as, that is taken as the for the valuation purpose under the customs law. For this valuation purpose, there are two concepts under the customs law, which is free on board. Second one is cost, insurance and freight, CIF basis, FOB basis. You will come across these terms called FOB basis and CIF basis. FOB basis nothing but free on board. It means for the moment the goods are loaded into the vehicle, the exporter is free. He is no more responsible for the goods. So the exporter will become free the moment the goods are onboarded to the vehicle. That is called as free on board. Cost, insurance and freight, it means what? This includes, the total value includes the FOB value plus the insurance amount, which is called as the marine insurance. The goods will be transported from one port to another. During the transportation, an insurance can be taken on those goods, because during the transportation, if the goods get destroyed or distracted, then an insurance can be taken on that. To avoid the risk of that, the insurance can be taken, and the premium or the cost incurred for taking that insurance, that will be added to this value. Third value is the freight amount. Freight amount is nothing but for the shipping charge from this port to another port. These three items will be, it means what? FOB means any cost incurred till the goods get boarded to the vehicle, plus any insurance for the duration of the travel in the vessel. Third one is any freight paid for the vessel or any freight paid for the aircraft. So all these three together forms part of CIF basis. Okay, up to the boarding it is called as FOB basis. So for this customs duty evaluation, under the foreign trade policy, which is the present foreign trade policy from 2015 to 2020. As per present foreign trade policy, we will have to measure the imports at CIF basis and the exports at FOB basis. Clear or not? You should be very clear. For exports, the value is taken at FOB basis. For imports, the value is taken at CIF basis. Okay, this is as per section 14. Okay, let us now understand an example. We'll discuss a question under these provisions which we have discussed now. The question here is, compute export duty for the following data. From the following data, you should compute the export duty. FOB price of goods is $100,000. $100,000 US is the FOB price of goods. It can be called as export as well. So FOB price of goods is 1 lakh US, and shipping bill presented electronically on 28th February 2018, and proper officer passed order permitting clearance and loading of goods for export on 1st March 2018. Next is rate of exchange and rate of export duty are provided under, and the rate of exchange is notified for export by CBEC, that is CBIC. The answer to this question is, I told you that the exchange rate should be taken the date of submission of bill of export. On that date, what is the exchange rate? You should consider that. Here they have provided the date of submission of bill of export is present around 28 February 2018. On 28 February, $1 is equivalent to 65 rupees of INR. You should take the exchange rate on submission of bill of export. So 1 lakh $US can be converted into INR in multiplied by rupees 65 will give you 65 lakhs Indian rupees. Okay, that is the exchange rate. Second is proper officer permitted the clearance of goods is got on 1st of March. So the relevant date for determination of rate of duty is the date of clearance by the officer. That's what we discussed in section 16 for the purpose of export. So as per that section, 1st of March is the relevant date for duty, and the customs duty applicable rate for customs duty for this is 8%. Can we understand this? So the exchange rate is determined on 28th of February and customs duty is on 1st of March. So you should be clearly understanding this, how you should determine the rate of duty. Now we will discuss on liability in certain special cases. The goods that are imported after exportation. The first type of first case here is goods that are imported after exportation. It means what, the goods have been exported from India and it is imported back for any reason. It is imported back. In those cases, the law states that duty on import shall be restricted to drawback or incentive claimed on export of goods. For example, while exporting the same goods, I have paid a duty of 12%. Okay, the duty applicable was 12%. Once the goods have been properly exported, then it is I can get an incentive of 12% or lesser than that. Even the department may allow 10% of incentive on that. Okay, so what happens? The goods are getting imported back. After some days, the goods are getting imported back. If the applicable rate is 12% for the imports, but because of this provision, it states that the rate of duty on import is restricted to the amount of incentive claim. In my case, the incentive claimed is only 10%. Though the duty on import is 12%, I am restricted to pay duty at the rate of only 10% only here. Okay. So for this, there are that is the first scenario. Second scenario is imported goods originally exported for repairs. See, it means what? See, you have exported the goods and the goods are getting imported back. If re-imported within 3 years, which can be extended up to 5 years, and the goods should not change its form and there should not be any change in ownership. If all these scenarios are if all these conditions are satisfied, then there is no duty on re-import of those goods. It means what? I will just explain this scenario. The goods have been imported. Maybe the goods have been imported. It is an imported goods, and those goods are exported back for the purpose of repairs. The goods are exported back to the same countries because there are certain repairs in that. After the goods are exported, the goods are again re-imported because once the repairs are over, the goods has to be imported back. If the goods are imported back within 3 years from the date of export, or it can be extended up to 5 years by proper officer, and the goods should not change its form. The goods as it is, it has gone, it should come back in the same form, and during the period of the 3 years there should not be any change in ownership. If all these conditions are satisfied, then for those re-import there is no duty chargeable. In the second scenario. Third scenario is goods re-imported. See, I have exported goods. In the previous scenario, I have imported goods and that goods are exported for the purpose of repairs. In the third scenario is I have exported the goods and those goods are imported back for the purpose of repairs I have to do. Exported goods are imported back. In the previous scenario, imported goods are exported back. Okay. So in the third scenario, goods exported or re-imported, and that re-imported goods can be classified into two. One is for the purpose of reprocessing, refining or remaking. So these are all the three process. For that purpose it is re-imported. That is one scenario. Second part is for any other reason. In the first part, it should be within 1 year from the date of export. You have exported the goods, within 1 year the goods has to be re-imported for this purpose. That is the time limit. Second, for if the goods are re-imported for any other reasons, then that re-imported goods can be classified based on the country from where the re-import has happened. If the goods are re-imported from Nepal, then it should be re-imported within 10 years. It means for the goods which are exported has to be re-imported within 10 years if it is re-imported from Nepal. If it is re-imported from any other country, then it has to be re-imported within 3 years from the date of export. Okay, so these are all so what is the result of it? If these conditions are satisfied, then duty need not be paid for those re-import. Okay, for that there are certain additional conditions. Additional conditions are, there should be an import bond has to be signed by the re-importer. The person who re-imports the goods, he has to sign an import bond with the customs authorities. That is, one bond has to be signed. Second is, re-imported goods has to be re-exported back within 6 months from the date of import. There are 3 dates here which says that one date is the goods have been exported today. Okay, exported goods are re-imported back. That is what the scenario here. The re-import has to happen within 1 year if the goods are re-imported for refining, remaking or reprocessing. If the goods are re-imported for any other reasons, it should be re-imported within 3 years in case of all the countries. In case of Nepal, then it is 10 years. Okay, so these are all the conditions. Additional conditions are, once the re-import has happened, the importer has to file an import bond with the customs authority. That is one condition. Second condition is, the re-imported goods has to be, after carrying on this process, has to be exported back within 6 months from the date of import. If all these conditions are satisfied, then duty need not be paid on those re-imports. There is another notification number 60/2018, issued on 11th September 2018. This notification says that goods that are manufactured in India, if the goods are manufactured in India, on all these scenarios you can find one difference. The re-import, instead of 3 years from any other countries, instead of 3 years, it has been extended to 7 years. So the re-import can happen within 7 years in case of any other re-imports, but all other conditions are same. Okay, and the re-imported goods has to be re-exported within 6 months. All those things are same. Here they have provided one additional condition stating that the 6 months re-import period for 6 months, the export period of 6 months can be extended up to 1 year by the proper officer. Next provision we are going to discuss now is, there are certain circumstances in which duty will not be levied at all. There will not be any duty. What is that circumstance? It is defined in section. These scenarios are provided under section 13. Section 13 states that in case of pilferage is nothing but stealing of goods. If the goods got stolen or lost, then in that case duty is not payable if goods imported pilfered before cleared by customs authorities. The goods have been imported before the customs authorities cleared for home consumption. If the goods are pilfered, then there is no duty liability for the importer. The importer does not have any liability towards duty. Here it says that proof of pilferage not required to be established by the importer. The importer need not establish the proof of pilferage to the customs authorities, and also that if the duty is already paid, and then before the clearance of customs authorities, duty is already paid in advance, for example, and the goods are pilfered, then the importer can apply for a refund of those duty. That is what this provision says. And there are certain conditions for this pilferage. It says that the goods should have been pilfered. Actually, it should have been pilfered. Second is, after unloading and before clearance for home consumption. If the goods are pilfered before unloading from the vessel, then this section does not cover that scenario. This section only covers to the scenario where goods have been unloaded from the vehicle and before the clearance for home consumption, the goods have been pilfered. Also, one additional condition is that the goods should not have been deposited into the customs warehouse. Even warehoused goods are not covered under this section 13. There is a separate section for that, we will discuss that later. But this section covers only to goods that are unloaded from the vehicle, pending for clearance by the customs authorities, and not warehoused. In all these conditions are satisfied, then duty liability is not there for the importer if the goods are pilfered. And one last condition is that the pilfered goods should not be restored back to the importer. Importer should not get back those pilfered goods. We will understand by a case question here. If goods are pilfered after the order of clearance is made, but before the goods are actually cleared, whether the duty would be liable. Here the answer is duty would be leviable, because the goods have been cleared by the customs authorities. Section 13 will not apply. But the goods are not yet physically cleared from there. It is at the responsibility of the importer. That means that the duty is leviable. Section 13 will not apply for this. Next provision is provision of section 13 would apply even it can be shown that pilferage took place prior to the unloading of goods. Whether the section 13 provisions will apply if the before unloading of goods, if the pilferage taken place. It says that it will not be, this section 13 will not be applicable. If the goods before unloading, if the pilferage has happened, then section 13 will not apply on those scenarios. Duty is leviable on that. Now we are going to discuss on circumstances in which no duty will be levied. There will not be any levy of duty at all. This is under section 21. Section 21 provides on derelict, jetsam, flotsam, wreck. These are all the scenarios. In these scenarios, duty will not be levied at all. Okay, it says that goods coming to India which are derelict shall be dealt with as if goods were imported into India. It is treated as import only under India. Meaning, okay, it means what? The goods have, the duty will be levied on those goods only. We will understand the terminologies for under this section. The first terminology is derelict. What is meant by derelict? You can see the first image here. It is nothing but the vessel or cargo is abandoned into sea. It means that it has sunk into the sea and without any hope of recovering the goods. The goods are completely drowned into the sea. There is no possible for recovering those goods. That is called as derelict. Second is jetsam. Jetsam is nothing but the goods are thrown away into the sea. The goods are thrown away into the sea for the purpose of reducing the weight of the ship, for the purpose to prevent it from sinking. If the ship is going to sink now, to prevent it from sinking, the person can unload certain goods. It can reduce the weight of the ship by throwing the goods into the water. If the goods are thrown into the water and the thrown goods are sunk into the water, it has not come out. It means what? It is called as jetsam. If the same goods have floated into the water and it has come out of the water, it is floating into the water, it means it is called as flotsam. Jetsam and flotsam are almost same. The purpose is the same, but if the thrown away goods are sunk into the water, it cannot come out of the water, it means that jetsam. If it floats in the water, it means that it is called as flotsam. Next one is called as wreck. Wreck is nothing but there is a shipwreck. Shipwreck means there is a failure of ship. The ship has drowned into the sea. But what happened? There is a difference between derelict and wreck. Derelict means the ship has gone into the sea and it cannot come back. It cannot be recovered at all. But in the case of wreck, the ship has came out. It has got aside to some shore. You can see the third image here. The ship has been wrecked, but it has come to the shore. That is called as wreck here. These are all the scenarios where duty will not be levied, though it will be considered as an import only. Okay, we will understand the scenario for abatement of duty in case of damaged goods. If the goods are damaged, what is the abatement of duty? Abatement of duty on imported goods which are damaged, that is discussed in section 22. Goods damaged or deteriorated at any time before or during unloading. Before unloading or during unloading. Second scenario is after unloading but before examination for assessment. Goods have been unloaded but it is pending for examination by the customs authorities. That is the second scenario. Third scenario is the goods are warehoused. but the damage has happened due to fire or any other reason. Before clearance for home consumption, in these three scenarios, there is an abatement duty. Abatement is provided by the authorities. There is an abatement of duty. The abatement of duty is calculated by applying the following formula. Abatement of duty is equal to duty before damage minus proportionate duty on damaged goods. How to calculate proportionate duty on damaged goods? Value of damaged goods divided by total value before damage into total value of duty before damage. If you take that, you will get the proportionate duty of damaged goods. From the total duty, you should deduct the proportionate duty on damaged goods. Then you will get the value of abated duty of abated duty on this. Here we are mentioning about value. Value is nothing but it is as valued by the proper officer. The value is to be valued by the proper officer, or the officer may even sell the goods on auction or even otherwise. He may either value on his own or he may sell the goods on auction, and the sale proceeds can be deemed to be the value of goods. Whatever the value the officer is getting by selling the goods on auction, that sale proceeds can be deemed as a value of those goods. This is what the provisions relating to abatement of duty on imported goods under section 22. Next we are going to discuss on remission of duty. Remission of duty on goods that are lost or destruction of goods. Goods are lost or destruction of goods. Here you can see pilferage also, but here it is called as remission of duty. It is not called as no levy. There is a difference between section 13 and section 23 subsection 1. We will understand that now. Here this case is other than pilferage. Imported goods lost or destroyed other than on pilferage. If it is on pilferage, then it means section 13. If it is other than pilferage, before clearance for home consumption, any time before clearance for home consumption, the assistant commissioner or deputy commissioner shall remit the duty on such goods. Remit means he can forego the duty. He can leave away the duty on that. Though the duty is leviable, but AC or DC can remit the duty. He can order for remittance of duty. It is called as remission of duty. There are certain conditions under that. The burden of proof is on importer. In the case of pilferage, we discussed that the burden of pilferage is not lying with the importer, but here under section 23 subsection 1, the burden of loss or burden of destruction has to be the proof of that lies with the importer only. Then the loss or destruction also includes leakage and the loss due to natural calamity, loss due to fire, etc. also included in this subsection. Warehoused goods also included under this subsection before clearance by the customs authorities. So whatever is excluded in the pilferage almost is covered under this subsection, section 23 subsection 1. And this section is applicable only on the total loss. If there is any left out portion, from that if there is any sale can be made, only the remission of duty can happen only after deducting the sale value or the salvage value of the damaged goods. Clear or not? So next subsection is subsection 2 under section 23, which is relinquishment of title on goods. Relinquishment of title is any importer may, it is the option of the importer, may before order of clearance, before the customs authorities clear the goods for home consumption or order for warehousing of goods, before warehousing those goods, can relinquish his title to the goods. He can relinquish means he can give away his authority to claim the goods. He can relinquish his title, and if the relinquishment has happened, then he is not liable to pay any duty under the Customs Act. If he has relinquished the title before the goods are cleared for home consumption or before the goods are warehoused as per the section 60 of the Act, then he need not pay any duty at all. Under importer need not pay any duty under the Customs Act. Here the proviso says that relinquishment is not possible if there is any offence committed on those goods. If the goods are smuggled goods or if there is any offence committed on those goods, then the importer cannot relinquish his title. He cannot say that if the goods have been caught by the customs authorities, he cannot say that I don't want to take the goods, I want to relinquish my title. That is not possible in the case if there is an offence on those goods or if the goods are smuggled goods. but in other cases the importer can relinquish his title. What is the cases of relinquishment? Goods are not according to specifications. If the goods are not according to specifications, then importer can relinquish his title. Or the goods are damaged or deteriorated during voyage and become useless. The goods have become useless during the voyage, it has got damaged. In those cases, he can relinquish his title. Or if there is any breach of contract, if there is a contract between importer and exporter and the exporter has breached the contract, then importer can relinquish his title and he can refuse to take delivery of those goods because the exporter has breached the contract. Importer wants to relinquish his title. Clear or not? So this is what all about relinquishment of goods under Customs Duty Act. So we will conclude our discussion for this video under this Customs Act, and we will continue this balance provisions of Customs Act in another videos. Clear? And thank you for your patient watching of this video. Please wait for the future videos and subscribe to my channel for getting the instant notifications of any new videos posted in any of these topics. Okay, clear? Thank you.